One of the true pleasures of my getting to do this job is that I get to talk to people like our next guest who, honestly, she's a ripping good time, and also she's a congresswoman, and she puts fear into the heart of those who don't have common sense. And I'm welcoming into the show Representative Harriet Hageman. She represents Wyoming, and I'm so glad you could join us again.
Well, thank you. That was very nice of you to say. How fun is that?
It's pretty fun. I think you're pretty fun. I imagine in another life, if I wasn't doing this, I would go into Congress and we would just stalk down the halls together before we went to vote on bills, and we would strike fear into the hearts of everyone who didn't believe in the truth. Not good people, but the bad ones. They would be like, "Oh no, here they come." So
I think you can still do it, Stacy. I don't think there's anything holding you back.
Well, I'll have to bring that to Mr. Washington and see what he thinks about it. I think he likes me working from home. But in any case, you have now new legislation, so this is where it's at with the Republicans. We need legislation, and I so respect and admire President Trump, and he's a buzzsaw. He's got the executive orders going. It's a totally different atmosphere right now. But at the end of his term, we need significant changes in legislation to make sure that these things stick. Even though we're hoping for another Republican presidency after President Trump, we got to make new legislation, which is what you're doing. This is to reinforce parental rights in education.
Well, we need legislation because that's the way that our constitutional system should work. As a republic, it should not be the unelected bureaucrats. And with all respect for the president that I possibly have, even executive orders. And what a lot of people don't realize about executive orders is they don't apply to the general public. They apply to the government. That's his statement of how his agencies and the people who work for the executive branch should conduct themselves. A lot of people don't realize that they're not forward-facing, they're inward-facing. That is, by definition, what an executive order is. The reason that executive orders have become so incredibly important is that the federal government has permeated so much of our lives that when an executive order is issued, it actually does have an impact on our society, which was never intended. So, yes, we need to be drafting legislation so that our constituents have certainty, so that we have stability, so that we know what the law is, and we don't feel like we're on a ping pong table where the law changes every 4 years because an executive order changes. In terms of my legislation, I want to strengthen the law to protect the rights of parents and families. That is the absolute foundation to a civilized society. And for the last 30 to 40 years, we have allowed our bureaucracy, and most specifically our Federal Department of Education and some of our so-called social services agencies, to really try to take control of our children. And it has dramatically undermined our society, our culture, and our families.
It has. And I love your analogy there, the ping pong table. There's also an unintended, really negative consequence of that. And that is from the Obama administration to President Trump, and then to Biden, and now back to President Trump. Other leaders around the world have to change their posture with the United States depending on who's in office, because these aren't laws, they're executive orders. And President Biden actually really did dastardly things with the executive orders, and then ignored the Supreme Court when he was smacked down. Yeah, so our partners across the world can't really trust America, depending on who gets elected here.
Well, that is exactly right. So what you see is you're seeing international policy, global policy being dictated by the whim of almost what becomes a dictator and despot. And that's what's so dangerous about this. One day I was at a class at the University of Wyoming in the College of Ag, and I was talking about the Constitution and kind of gave them an overview of the framework of the Constitution. And I talked about how much I revered it. And a gentleman who was clearly from another country raised his hands, and he said, he was a foreign student, and he said, "Why do you have such reverence for the Constitution?" And I said, "Because we have the longest serving Constitution in the history of the world. And what it does is it provides us an enormous amount of certainty and stability." I said, "We have countries around the world that have gone gone through 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 constitutions in the last 120 years. And what that means is nobody ever knows what the rules are. But in the United States of America, if you enter into a contract with me and I breach that contract, you know that you have access to the court system and you can file a lawsuit and you can have a judge to enforce that contract against me. And I said what that does is it provides stability and certainty so that we can raise our families, we can support our schools, we can support our communities, we can go to the grocery store, we can build a new house, we can build a new business. And I said the most important thing you have with government is certainty. And when we govern by fiat, when we govern by executive order, when we govern by regulation, it takes that certainty away, and it's why Congress needs to act.
So every bit of what you just said there is what we probably need to, remember when we were forced to listen to CNN, watch CNN at the airports? What we need is a new channel, and it would be the congressional channel just for the Republicans to put out messages like what you just shared so that people could have an understanding of it and place pressure on their legislators, because we have bills that, we have a razor-thin majority. With some of these bills are going to have trouble getting through because some of these elected members don't really have a true understanding, as you do, of how important this is.
Well, tonight, did you hear what happened? The Senate killed the bill that would have prohibited men from competing against girls and women in sports. Well, I'm going to tell you, and I don't even have to tell you I'm a girl because we all know that. Mm-hmm. But the fact that we are fighting about this in 2025 as to whether a man can come in and take away my opportunity to engage in sports, we had 45 Democrats and independents that voted against women and girls in this country. And I can't think of anything that is much more reprehensible than that, because again, it comes down to, we know there's a difference between girls and boys. We know there's a difference between men and women. That comes back to that certainty that I'm talking about. And yet we have had a government over the last 4 years that has tried to gaslight us and make us believe that, well, all you have to do is get up in the morning and say you're a girl. And I'm like, hogwash, that's baloney, and we all know it. But what happens when you create a society based upon that level of dishonesty is you create a society that people can believe anything, do anything. There's no moral authority. There's no moral structure. And again, that's why I am so dedicated to saving and protecting our families, because the family is the smallest governing unit that you have. And throughout history, our forefathers recognized that. They recognized that it was the parents that were responsible for our moral teachings, for our education, for learning about love and relationships and responsibility and authority. And really, and it has been going on for a while, but especially since the advent and the creation of the Federal Department of Education, we've largely allowed these unelected bureaucrats and administrative agencies to take over our education, and look what happened.
Well, and you know what happens is a lot of very upset parents, and then the Biden administration went through and turned those upset parents into, possible terror suspects. And again,
terrorists.
Right, these are the consequences of having someone in office who he was there to destroy. He was there to destroy this country, and he got quite a ways along that continuum before he was, sent packing at that debate by President Trump. I can't believe that we had trouble with the simple binary truth that there are two sexes, and there's truth and there's lies, there's light, there's dark, there's Republicans, there's Democrats, we have a binary existence everywhere you look that is proven not just by science but by common sense. But every bit of what we're discussing tonight, that's why President Trump came back to office. That's why you ran and have been elected and reelected. This is a part of why we're all here. So I wanted to turn to the House Republican budget resolution. Talk to us about what's the update here.
So the reason that we passed the budget resolution so that we can start working with the Senate to come together with a budget, and then at that point we can do what's called this resolution process. And reconciliation. And what reconciliation allows us to do is basically attempt to balance the budget through the Senate and the House working out how we're going to spend our money. And what is important about this for where we are in this moment in time is we do not have to have 60 votes in the Senate to do this. So we can push forward with the Republican conservative agenda without having to go through the Senate Democrats and implement some incredibly important reforms. Cutting spending, implementing what DOGE is finding, putting together ways in which to roll back the horrific anti-humanist policies of the Biden administration that they were attempting to implement through the idea that we're burning our world to the ground. All of those things that have happened over the last 4 years and really the last several decades, we have the ability to right that ship if we can come together and put on paper some pretty common sense ideas of how and where we want this country to go. And frankly, I think that we're pretty united in that. I think there's some pushback. I think there's some posturing. I think there's all that stuff. But I think that the majority of Republicans realize that this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We have to take advantage of it. We have to be bold. We need to be accountable. We need to go forward, and we actually need to be courageous and do what's right for the American public.
Oh, I love that. I love it. Okay, one more thing while we have you here, and we're so grateful for your time in the evening here with us on SiriusXM. You have something, you're the chair of something called the Anti-Woke Caucus. I feel a T-shirt coming on. Tell us all about it.
Yes, I am, because all this nonsense that you and I have been talking about has been embedded in our government on so many different layers, at the grade school level, junior high, high school, college, within our businesses, within our government. And the Anti-Woke Caucus is designed to expose this nonsense and help educate people and draft legislation so that we can start peeling back these layers and getting rid of the things that are so terribly insidious. I'm going to use the USAID as an example. We're all hearing about the things that USAID was funding around the world. And we can all say, oh, my gosh, we were spending $50 billion on that. We were spending $540 million on that. We were spending, $2.5 million on that. And the money is one thing, but here's what's even more important to keep in mind. We were exporting serious toxicity around the world. And I may not agree with the government in Colombia or Guatemala or Venezuela, but the people who live in those countries love their families. They love their communities. They believe in traditional values. Their leadership may not, but they do. And we were forcing things upon them that are so toxic. Again, this gender ideology, this concept that you can change your sex, the idea that God got something wrong, the idea that we don't need mothers and fathers, and both mothers and fathers in our homes. USAID wasn't so bad because of the amount of money we were spending. USAID was bad because it was exporting absolute toxicity around the world and using our tax money to do it. And that's what the Anti-Woke Caucus is trying to go after.
I can't wait to see the fruit of your work. I've been so excited about DOGE. In fact, I think for the first time, I've been excited about something that comes out of government, an actual government agency. I'm more excited about it than probably anything else in recent memory that is a government project. And that is because transparency.
We see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes. And I can see it and I can understand it. And I see other people who are excited about it. It's like all of the things that we've campaigned on them. We've donated on them. Everyone's been a part of this big machine, and we've kind of not seen results. And then all of a sudden, you have something called DOGE, which I thought, it's so cute. They're using that, kind of slang word that the young people like. But then I realized Department of Government Efficiency, can that work? It's working. And I'm so excited about it. I'm also excited about you heading up the Anti-Woke Caucus. I love it. I think it's brilliant, and it's going to have great results as well. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on the show, Congresswoman Hageman.
Thank you, Stacy. We have a lot of battles ahead of us, but I have always been optimistic. I have always believed that we could turn this country around. And I just want everybody to understand that throughout history, it's always been a very small number of people who changed the course of history. We don't need the millions. We need the tens and the dozens and the hundreds, and we need the people who are willing to fight for what is right. And we're always going to win this battle because we have that Constitution, we have that stability, we have our love for family and community. We know who our God is. We know that he doesn't make mistakes. We know what we believe in, and we know that ultimately this is truly the shining city on the hill. And I'm just absolutely as optimistic as I could be right now.
I am too. I'm absolutely optimistic along with you, and I think it's going to be a really fun time. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you. Bye.